I want to issue a fantastic challenge to any of you who will take my dare. I recently made fantastic claims about how you can almost memorize scripture passively by just sitting and listening to it. Since I did that, that was just a couple of weeks ago, since I did that, it's created quite a bit of conversation. Our Sunday school class talked about it. People have talked to me about it. Some say they agree with me. That's the way they did it. Others have never tried it. So I want to make a bit of a wager with you, although I'm not going to gamble. But I dare you to download an audio version of the Bible and go to the book of James. Now, I'm picking James because James is short, only 5 chapters, and because I preached through the gospel or through the epistle of James just recently at the end of summer, first of fall, in the lectionary. That means you have recently heard 4 or 5 sermons on James, and there are 4 or 5 chapters. Now, what I want you to do is I want you not to replace your regular Bible study, not to replace devotions. Don't feel like you have to learn anything at all. Don't feel like you have to study. Don't feel like you have to have a certain amount of minutes of prayer and reflection on the scripture. I don't want you to do that. That'll spoil it. What I want you to do is to replace the music you listen to, or a TV show you watch at night, or just the quiet around the house when you're going about your daily business. I want you to replace that for 5 days. No more, no less, 5 days. And every day of the 5 days, I want you to listen to all 5 chapters of the book of James. Chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, on a Monday, on a Tuesday, on a Wednesday, on a Thursday, but not trying to learn, not using it as a Bible study, to replace entertainment. And at the end of the 5 days, I want you to come and tell me if you learn more from James from my 5 Sundays of preaching or from the 5 days of just listening to somebody read it. Now, I don't really want to put myself out of business, so I want to say both are important. I don't want to put your pastor, if you're from a different church, out of business. Both are important. You need pastors. Don't fire your pastor, but tell me how much you learned and if it wasn't one of the most useful experiments you've had. 5 days, 5 chapters every day. Listen, don't study, just listen to it. Now I better go. I've got a tractor coming up behind us. This is a short midweek devotion from the Littleton United Methodist Church. I don't know if they celebrated birthdays in the early church or not. I mean, I'm sure they were happy when a new boy was born, but I don't know the birth story of Paul or of James or of many of the early churches like Timothy. I don't know their birth stories, except for the characters like John the Baptist and Jesus and those with miraculous birth stories for special purposes. But the average Christian, I don't know if they did. I don't know if they needed to. I mean, we're all happy when a new child comes into the world, but the child is a bundle of possibilities, of potential, of promise. But it's not promised that's realized yet. You really don't know if that child is going to be a wise person or a foolish person. If they're going to be a person of great good or if they're going to be a person of evil. You don't know if they're going to be industrious, if they're going to be kind of lazy. You just don't know because they're just potential, promise, but not promise that has been realized yet. But at death, that's why I'm in the little cemetery today. At death, you know. At death, you know how that person chose to live their lives. And I don't know if the early church celebrated birthdays, but I do know that the early church celebrated death days. Many of the early Christians lived lives worth emulating. And we could learn a lot from them. The early church learned a lot from them. And as they sacrificed their lives for the gospel of Jesus Christ, they were remembered. They were remembered for the way they lived. They were remembered for the way the potential of their lives was filled out through Christ. And so what we had was, especially those that were very notable, we had the beginnings of different saints' festivals. You know, a feast day for this saint, for that saint. This person that died in the arena. This person that sacrificed so much for the gospel. We had their stories. And it wasn't so much that we celebrated them as it was we remembered their stories and their lessons. Well, we still have something like that today. While much of the world this past week has been celebrating Halloween and scary movies and things like that, November the 1st is what we call All Saints Day. November the 2nd, in some areas, they call it All Souls Day. It's a day we remember those who have gone on before us and have lived lives worthy of learning from. So I'm going to challenge you today to think about those people that have gone on before us, that have made a big difference in your life. Who is there out there that has introduced you to Christ? Who is there out there that has taught you how to live a good life? And while I'm at it, I probably would also say that this coming Sunday, as I'm taping this, is the first Sunday of November. It's been traditional in some churches that on the first Sunday of November, they celebrate those that have passed away in the previous year and those whose lives have made a great deal of difference to the people in the church and the congregation. So we're going to do that this week. If you can think, or if you know of someone you want us to highlight, mention their lives on this coming Sunday service, contact me sometime this week. Email me. Tell me who that person was, and maybe just, not a long obituary, but maybe just a single sentence on how they made a difference in your life. Looks like that tree got me. Whenever a pastor conducts a funeral, there are several things that are often said. And at the graveside service, one of the most important things to be said is to commit that person into the loving care of God. But next to that, I think one of the other big things to be said, and most people miss it, is that where this life has gone, we too will go one day. And before we leave and go our different directions, we often pray for everybody that's there that God will give them the wisdom, God will give them the grace to live lives that are worth imitating or lives that are worth learning from. And so my prayer for you today is that not only will we remember those that have made such a difference in our lives, but that God will use you to make a difference in someone else's life while we still have time, because the days go by quickly and our time is slipping by. May God guide you and guard you all through this week.